What's going on, everybody? This episode is with Bill Jennings, also known as the funding boss. If you need 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, or $100,000 for your business, for your life, for any reason at all, you have to listen to this. He's going to walk you through step by step how to fix credit, how to obtain money in the form of credit, and how to use it for your benefit. Stay tuned and make sure you reach out to him at Bill Jennings on Instagram if he can help you in any way. Ladies and gentlemen, Convicted Mindset. I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, Bill Jennings. What's going on, brother?
What's up, man? Happy to be here
today.
Good.
One thing that I love about you is your Linktree profile. It says funding boss.
It's what I go by.
Dude, I love everything about that. So we were just jamming before this and I wanted to dive in real quick. So one thing, and I'd love your take on this, one thing that I think is kind of screwed up in our culture, society, whatever it is people tell you, hey, we're not supposed to talk about money, Bill. All right. Well, question for you, right? If I knew the 6 winning lottery numbers for tonight or the Powerball that just hit for $1 billion, like you'd talk to your closest friends and family. Hey, what are you doing? But all of a sudden, when you get some money, well, who am I supposed to talk to?
Yeah.
If I can't get it. You know what I mean? And so how the heck am I supposed to learn about money when I can't talk about it, Bill?
Yeah, so it's actually two funny things. So one, that $1.3 billion lottery winnings, there was a one single winner, and they bought the ticket about maybe 6 miles down the road from where I'm sitting right now. So yeah, when it happens really close like that, it's like, come on, right? But it's true. People say, and I grew up that way too. You know, it was impolite to talk about money, right? And it's interesting because as I got older and the crowds that I hung out with changed, I realized that the only people that don't talk about money are broke people.
Yeah.
Right. I've got a good friend that his dad runs it's the largest real estate hedge fund in the world. Okay. So this is people that have a lot of money. And what I learned from him is from a very young age. I mean, we're talking when he was like 4 or 5 years old, every Sunday, their family would get together and have dinner and they would talk about finance. At a young age like that, they talk about what's a checking account. As they got older, and even now that all of his, him and his family, everybody's all married and moved out, they still all get together on Sundays and they talk about hedge funds and they talk about finance. So it's like, okay, that guy's, I mean, he's a little bit younger than me, but he's not a lot younger than me. And he grew up the complete opposite that I did. They did discuss money. So I think it's a polite way for people who don't have any money or don't have any knowledge of money to say, hey, we shouldn't talk about it because we're embarrassed of it.
Man, I think you're spot on. You're spot on. So the funding boss, people come to you for what reason? So
people come to me for 2 reasons. One, well, mainly the goal is to get access to capital. So it's typically people that are either in real estate or they're an entrepreneur looking to access capital. And a lot of times in that situation, they realize that they can't get approved for something because their credit isn't in a position to be able to get approved. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. What I do is, one, I help educate them on credit and how to, improve their credit so they can get approved and get into a fundable position. And then 2, get them access to the capital that they need. And that really is a fun thing to do a lot of times because people don't realize that they do have access to funding. A lot of times people think like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get approved for it because of X, Y, Z. Like they think they need a crazy business plan or they need to have a certain amount of assets. And the truth is, for the average person, they don't need all of that fancy stuff. We're not, the people that I deal with, at least, they're not trying to raise millions and millions of dollars, right? They're not trying to go on Shark Tank and ask for a $20 million, injunction of capital. That's not typically who we're working with. So it's a lot easier to obtain. It's just a matter of knowing the rules and knowing how to play the game.
Yeah, indeed. And the rules in the game, man, you couldn't have hit those 2 on the head. I think for the vast majority, maybe 9 out of 10, maybe I'm high on that number. You can correct me. They don't even know what the game is, and they don't even know what the rules are for the game.
Not at all. So there was a survey that was done a few years ago, and it was they asked a bunch of millennials what they thought that a credit score was. Like, what's the purpose of a credit score? And the numbers were like staggering. It was one of those things that you had to like Google afterwards because you're like, there's no way this is possibly true. I don't remember the exact numbers on it, but it was something like 80 something percent of people literally had the wrong answer. And some of them, there was actually a large chunk of them thought that a credit score was like the number. It was basically like your number in line to be approved for something from a bank. They thought that it was like it was like you waited until finally they give you money. Like they literally had no understanding of it. And you honestly, like, it's funny, but you can't exactly blame them because this isn't something that's taught. Just like people don't grow up talking about money at the kitchen table, they also don't grow up talking about their credit score at the kitchen table, right? And part of it is generational. Like I know my parents, everything kind of comes from what you learn from your parents, right? So my parents, who grew up in the 60s and 70s, their parents experienced the Great Depression. Like they saw that happen, right? Mm-hmm. So they understand, like, we need to hold on to our cash. We don't go into debt. We live within our means, and that's just how we operate. So when you see that growing up, that's what you think. You're like, oh, debt is bad. I shouldn't go into debt. I need to live within my means, right? So they don't utilize credit. And when they do, they typically utilize it wrong because they were never taught the right way to do it. They were taught credit bad, stay away from it, right? Yep. So it's just re-educating and changing mindset completely. There's two different ways to do it. Like, one, you can use credit the way that the banks kind of, I guess, want you to use it, which is to use it in a negative way, go into consumer debt and become a slave to the bank and pay interest for a very long time. Or you can learn and understand the game, understand that debt is leverage, and then make the bank a slave to you. And that's what I like showing people is the correct way to do it, because there are ways that you can play the game where the bank is literally your slave.
Man, I'm going to dive into that. I'm going to tell you a story first that you're going to laugh about. So when I was managing money many moons ago, my early 20s, this Forbes 400 mentor of mine took me out to Indianapolis and said, hey, we're doing a bunch of properties here, and here's how we do them, and yada, yada. And while he was there, he gave me some crumbs. And the first crumb that he gave me was a $20,000 hard money loan. And I tell this story, people, and I just want you to validate this. I tell the story all the time. I took a balance transfer check from Bank of America, a $25,000 line. I wrote myself a $20,000 check, plus I think it was 3%, whatever they're going to charge me. I wrote that check to myself, deposited it in my bank account, and I gave this guy that $20,000 and made 15 points while I had a 0% interest for 15 months.
So arbitrage. Yep.
Yes.
That's a method that a lot of our clients use, actually, because there are ways to access capital at 0%. And as long as you can make more than that, right, in a period of time, which hard money loans is a nice way to do it because you set very short terms. Say, hey, look, I need this money back in 6 months or a year. You're still within that 0% period. And it's just complete arbitrage. You get it at 0%, you charge somebody 12 or 15%, and you make the spread. Worst case scenario, they default on it. And now you get a property that's probably halfway completed already. Right. And you're able to give it to another investor.
Right. That you're 1,000% right. You're totally right. And so I love that people get to see different sides to it. So talk about, is there any other type of creative funding that you see out there that you coach people that they're typically not aware of?
Yeah. So the main funding that we help people get is really it's credit cards. It's 0% business credit cards. Because the great thing about business credit is once you understand how to do it and you do it properly, it doesn't report on your personal credit report. So like if you've got a personal credit card, which this is what people have experience with and they see the negative side of it. If, Bank of America gives you that $20,000 credit card, and let's say it was a personal credit card, if you use that $20,000 and you max out that credit card, your credit score drops drastically.
Yeah.
Because 35% of your credit score is based on your debt ratio, how much debt you are using on those cards. So your score is going to drop drastically until you pay it down. So people see that and they go, oh, debt's bad. Debt lowered my score. It's pretty simple cause and effect, right? They're like, debt, my score went down. I don't like that. That's bad, right? But when you use business credit, you can set it up to where that credit card does not show up on your personal credit report whatsoever. So now you can max that card out completely and use it and put it into an income producing asset. like you did, right? Use it for arbitrage, use it for lending it back out. And now it doesn't impact your credit score whatsoever. All of that money is basically a ghost. So when we can show people how to get access to 100, 150, $250,000 in 0% business credit that doesn't show up anywhere, now it's a game changer. Because you can also kind of leverage it to get, like, if you can set up multiple businesses and do the same thing on each of them, now all of a sudden you're double, triple the amount of money, right? So there's really ways to get access to money in a quick fashion. And this is where I know with your background and a lot of the people that you speak to are people that are coming out of, they were just incarcerated and they're coming out, right? And in those situations, it is difficult for them to go sit down at a bank and try and actually get approved for a legitimate business loan, right? But they're not checking any boxes or doing any background checks when you're applying for a credit card. So as long as you get your credit into a position where you can get approved for that, you all of a sudden have the exact same opportunities that everybody else does getting approved for credit. And you can use that to get into business, right? Because it's going to be a lot harder to find a job than it is going to be able to create your own, right? So if you can create your own opportunity by creating your own job and creating your own, investment into it, not having to take outside money, you're in a great position. Like all of a sudden you completely leveled the playing field, right?
Genius. I freaking love it. Every single person listening to this, hopefully your inbox is like a large one. Every person listening to this wants access to capital. So what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? Social, website, all of it.
Yeah. So if you go to Instagram at Bill Jennings, that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And as you mentioned before, if you go to my link tree, there's a link in there to apply for funding. And there's also a credit course in there. So if you're in a position where you're like, hey, I want to get into this stuff, but I don't really understand how to use credit, or I had credit challenges in the past, or I don't have any credit, that's a good place to start. Because not only will I fully educate you on how credit works, but I'll show you how to use it properly, how to remove things off of your credit if there are negative things on there, because things can come off and you could do it legally and ethically to where you're not breaking any rules. And a lot of it too is people just not having credit history, right? Like if you, if you're one of those people just like that never used credit, not having any credit is almost worse than having bad credit. Like you need to actually have credit. So creating that credit history and building it properly, there's a lot of misinformation on the internet on doing it that actually kind of sets you back. So we can kind of show you how to do that the proper way.
Yeah, coming out as a ghost. I hear that all the time with like a 000.
Yeah. And it's actually kind of it's interesting because a lot of people, especially if they end up going away for a period of time, right? They're probably not paying their bills in that period of time. So their credit is going to be shot, right? But depending on how long, like actually a guy that's in my office, he's a few doors down from me. He was gone for 11 years. And when he went in, his credit was bad at that point. And, obviously it became worse while he was there. But when he got out, it was time heals all in that situation, because after a certain period of time, things come off of your credit report. They stop reporting. Yeah. So his credit was basically as if he was 18 years old once he got back out, because there was nothing there. So we set him up with a few small accounts. We built those accounts. And I literally just pulled it again right before we hopped on this because I wanted to see where he was at. And he's at a 738 right now. So his credit score is, in a very good position where he can get approved for things. So, and that wasn't a long period of time. That's been maybe 6 months. There's ways to get it back to where it needs to be in a quick period of time. And I think a lot of people just assume that it's trash and they don't even try,
Yeah. You know what we need to do? Couple thoughts. So what I want to, we'll put this together offline. So on a nightly basis, we're in about 700,000 tablets institutional wise around the country. The inmates have access to these tablets. And so what we need to do is put together like a 1-page PDF because most of these guys will get out on, 12 months to the gate. I feel, you can correct me, but I feel like at 12 months to the gate, they should contact your office and start to work on the credit.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like there's no reason in the world that these people are walking out other than they don't know. There's no reason in the world that these people aren't walking out with a credit score, 600, 620, whatever it might be. And if you had 12 months to work with them, there's no reason they could leave, like you said, with access to capital, with a decent credit score, with the ability to maybe even lease a Toyota instead of a buy here, pay here, jerk off lot.
Yeah.
Right? Like
100%.
We should put that together, a little simple PDF like for tablets.
Yeah.
And get that out to the world.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea because it's the same thing that happens to college kids, really. When you're in a position where you're starting out or starting over, right? You don't really have much credit. So all the predatory lenders are the ones that come at you, right? Like, I mean, I know they kind of shut this down a little bit, but I mean, not too long ago, years ago, you go to a college campus and on that first day of orientation, there's tables set up and they're like, hey, a free book bag or a free water bottle if you sign up for a credit card. And those credit cards, they approve you for a $300 credit limit with a $100 activation fee and a $50 monthly fee and 30% interest. And then they wonder why everybody comes out of college with terrible credit. I mean, I didn't go to college, but when I was young, we didn't talk about money, right? So my parents didn't have money. They had bad credit. And I feel like credit is one of those things it's basically hereditary. Like if your parents had bad credit, more than likely you also have bad credit. Because you learned those same habits, right? You didn't understand how to use it. So I went into debt at a young age and then I didn't pay the stuff back. And my credit went bad. I filed bankruptcy at one point. I had cars repossessed. I mean, I went through the whole gamut of everything possibly bad that could happen to your credit. I've done it. And I've gotten myself to a position now where I'm, almost 800 again. So the great thing about credit is when you damage it, it isn't over for good, right? You can always rebuild it. But there's shortcuts to it if you understand, again, how to play the game.
Yeah. Authorized users. I've got my wife and I, we have 4 children under the age of 10. And our kids are on our American Express as an authorized user.
Awesome.
Tell people what that means. So it's not coming from me because people go, oh yeah, Travis, whatever. What does that mean? What does that do to a kid?
So an authorized user is essentially somebody gets approved. So Travis gets approved for a credit card. He's got his credit card. He's responsible for the credit card. He can then add other what are called authorized users onto the card. So like he said, he put one of his kids on his card. So now that child has a card in their name. They're not legally responsible for the charges on the card, but technically they could go to the mall and run that card up, right? And if they don't pay it back, it's on you, basically, right? But I'm sure you're teaching them to be responsible. But now all of Travis's credit history on that account now starts showing up on their credit report. So same situation, me growing up, parents had bad credit. I go to get my first car at like 16 years old, and I go and apply for a loan. And I find out that they're like, you got declined. And I was like, oh, I assume I'm declined because I have no credit. And they're like, no, it's because you've got a collection with Sears from 1978. And I'm like, well, that's weird because I was born in 1984. You'd see that literally on the line right like below that. Like it shows my date of birth. I couldn't have gotten in 1978. So I'm a junior. So my dad's credit was showing up on mine. So I literally started out with bad credit because his stuff was showing on my credit report. On the opposite side of that, my best friend at the time, his dad had amazing credit and had amazing finances, and he did what you did. By the time he was like 16 years old, he had multiple of his dad's credit cards on his credit report, and he had an 800 credit score. And he didn't even realize that his dad did that for him. So I started out an uphill battle, and he started out at a great spot. We grew up in the same neighborhood. It was just the knowledge that our parents had and how they set us up. So what you're doing is exactly what you should be doing is, making sure that your kids are starting out probably in a better position than you started out,
Totally. Do you have any favorite credit cards at the moment?
So it really depends. I mean, I use my American Express Platinum for all of my charges. Like everything goes through that card. And then I just pay that in full every single month. So you have to be careful with American Express has 2 different types of cards. They've got charge cards, which is your traditional American Express where you have to pay it in full every single month. So this is, the fun card that you hear, in rap songs. They talk about the black card and stuff like that, which I have a black card, but it's a complete waste of money. But any of the charge cards like that, it's an unlimited card, basically. There's what's called no preset spending limit. So you can charge as much as you want on that card within reason. You can literally go buy a Lamborghini on it if you want, but you have to pay it in full by the end of the month. It isn't a monthly payment. You have to pay it in full at the end of the month. So I put all of my charges on my Amex and I pay it in full every single month. There's other things which are normal credit cards, which Amex also has, where you'll have an actual limit on it. They'll say, hey, your credit limit is $20,000. You can charge things on it, and then you make minimum payments every month and you carry that balance and pay interest. So American Express, the charge cards are actually easier to get than a credit card because you have to pay it in full every single month. But you got to be very, very good with your finances. It's very easy to get into trouble when you charge things. It's a lot easier to swipe your card than it is to unfold cash and pay people, right? So all of a sudden you think you have more money than you do. You figure at the end of the month, I'll find a way to square myself away, and then you can't. And now you're in trouble. So you want to make sure if you're using a charge card to pay it in full every single month, keep it within reason. But that's my favorite card just because there's a lot of good points and perks with it.
I was going to go there next.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've got some dope points and you've done some cool things with it.
Yeah, I travel a lot. So anything that you put through on the MX Platinum, depending on specific airlines and stuff like that, you get 5 times the points for booking hotels and airlines on there. So, I mean, I just sent my son and his mom and her family on vacation to Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. I paid for their hotel and their upgrades on their airline, all with points. So they were able to go on a vacation for literally nothing, just because of points. And I do that frequently. I'll book flights for myself for completely free. So if you play the point game, and I don't play it to the completely to the abilities that I see some other people do. I mean, where they're literally flying and, Emirates first class, like to Dubai and stuff like that for free. And there are ways to do that. It takes a lot of effort and time to accumulate points like that. But yeah, I mean, you can literally live off of points if you do it right.
Yeah, for sure. I've got a buddy who travels quite extensively. He's in the mortgage industry, and his whole he's got it all dialed in. This hotel, this airline, and the reason he does is because he takes 3 weeks, and that's like his anniversary 3 weeks with his wife, and they get like the private, off of St. Kitts with overlooking the water, and they flew private, and it literally it's his 49, 48 weeks out of the year, so that he can take these 3 weeks, and it's all paid for from his point.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, there's so many advantages to doing that, and when you're in a position where your credit is bad and you're using your debit card because you don't have a high limit credit card or a charge card like that, you're literally losing out on so many perks. I mean, I went so many years not using credit cards because I had, bad credit. And then once I even fixed my credit, at first I was like, I don't want to be in that situation again. So I just didn't use credit cards at all. And I realized like you're literally throwing away a substantial chunk of money, depending on how big your spend is monthly, on not using all of those bonuses and those perks. So yeah, it's having those points is really, really good. If you're looking at like good cards just to have access to money, like for businesses, like the Business Chase Inc. card is one of my favorite cards because they give real high credit limits. I mean, right now we're getting $45, $50, $60,000 approvals just from that one card for people. And that's for people that their business will, it isn't like you have to have a business that's been around for a long time that's crushing it with revenue. These are businesses that we set up for the people on the same day that we apply for the cards. So these are brand new companies with no revenue that are getting approved for amounts like that. Right now we're in a very unique time because of the way the economy is. Banks are giving out a much higher credit limit than they typically do.
Interesting. Speaking of the economy and finances, what are you seeing as opportunities over the next 12, maybe 24 months?
I think there's going to be a lot. There's, Warren Buffett has a quote. He says, be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. Right. And like right now, everything is about fear on the news, right? Everything is negative, negative, negative. So right now is when the people who have money are going to make a lot more money. The housing market we see is slowing. We had the largest decrease in sales prices. So people cutting their prices, their asking prices, the largest month over month that we've seen since 2020. And now it sounds terrible when you hear the statistic, but realistically, that's not all that terrible because of the fact that the past year or so, the numbers were so inflated. I mean, people were getting ridiculous amounts for their houses that the reduction in price that they're giving is probably warranted. So it's probably not as bad as they're making it seem, but there are going to be a lot of foreclosures on the horizon. Like it's going to happen. The housing market is going to come down eventually. And people who either have stored up money are going to be able to buy cash, or people who have prepared and gotten access to funding that they have just sitting and waiting are going to be able to pounce on that stuff and be able to purchase a lot of real estate. So more millionaires are made during down economies than in good economies. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity, just like there was during COVID. I mean, I don't know, aside from restaurants and industries like that, I don't know of any business owners personally that did bad during COVID. You either completely closed down or you had record-setting years. There was literally no in between. Nobody's numbers stayed the same. They either went to zero or they skyrocketed. So it's going to be the same. I think that people who are prepared are going to do very, very well in the next 12 months. People that aren't prepared are going to be licking their wounds afterwards.
Yeah, no, and you're right, man. And it's so interesting. I literally just had at our house in Idaho, I had some guys coming in and doing electrical work, and he said, "Hey, I looked you up before. I hope I don't bother you, but can I ask you some questions?" I said, "Yeah, go for it." And he said, "Is it tough times right now as an investor?" And I laughed and I said, "No, brother, these are the good times. Like you've got to turn off CNN, you've got to turn off Fox News. Like these are the good times. When people are running away, guys like us run inside. And I mean, the opportunities that we're seeing from real estate, small businesses, hard money lending, it's through the roof right now.
Yeah.
And to your point, 2022, 2021, 2020, 2021, and now 2022, crushing it, record setting years in all of the industries that we have our fingers in.
Yeah. And it's just a matter of being able to transition to different things. Like we do a lot of stuff with real estate investors, and because one of our main niches that we finance is we'll finance high ticket coaching programs.
Okay.
So when somebody is trying to get involved in real estate and they purchase a education program for 30 grand, 40 grand, we finance that for people that can't afford to purchase it outright. So we see what's happening, and it's interesting because a lot of these real estate coaches that are doing wholesale training or fix and flip training, we're seeing that they're doing worse right now because the market isn't really calling for that. The people who are doing multifamily, that's where everybody's crushing it right now because that's where things are heading. There's going to be a ton of rentals available, right? I mean, people are building rentals. There's 3 or 4 apartment complexes being put up right down the block over here because that's what's in need, right? We're in dire needs of rental properties. So kind of moving into like, okay, things are going down right now. Wholesaling probably isn't going to be the best until the market totally crashes. So what else can we do? There's a need for rentals. We need to get into multifamily. So now we're looking at larger dollar amounts of funding that we need. Right. But there's other ways that you can raise capital. So it's just, again, it's really understanding, learning, not being afraid to invest in a coach and some sort of education to where you can really get yourself into a position where you have a shortcut. And I think that's the most important stuff.
And can you work with people who have less than stellar credit?
So as far as getting them access to money immediately, it's a lot more difficult. I mean, there are products out there that are higher interest. We try not to put people in those positions because it usually tends to put them in a worse position. But if you're over like 620 or so, there's stuff that we can do for you. And then we can help you get into a position to be able to get access to more funding.
Got it. And you have the credit course that if they come in at, let's say, a 600, do you have a credit course that'll take them to 620, 640, et cetera?
Completely. Yeah. So, I mean, no matter how wrecked your credit is right now, like, and it couldn't be worse than mine was not too long ago. Okay. So there's nothing to be embarrassed with on it. It's just a matter of getting into a better position. Our course will help you get through all of that. Cause the thing is the course I created for that, it was because we had so many clients that would come to us that ended up having bad credit. So we would partner with credit repair companies that we would try sending people to get their credit fixed. The problem is most credit repair companies, and there are some good ones out there, but they're all a disaster for the most part. Like you give them money, things don't get done. They take too long. They're doing shady things. And now we have to worry about like, are they doing something illegal? And now it's going to come back on us because we're referring people there. It's a tough industry. It's a lot like a personal trainer, right? You hire a personal trainer, and if they teach you the right way, it takes too long and you don't see any results. So you fire them. Or they kind of do some shortcuts, which probably aren't the best for you long-term, and you end up getting injured, but you got quick results, right? It's the same thing with credit repair. They can give you quick results, but it's most likely illegal what they're doing. Or they can do it the right way and it takes too long and you're like, man, this company sucks, and you fire them. So it's a really tough thing. So we decided, you know what, instead of sending people to credit repair companies, we're just going to create a course that basically teaches them exactly what they need to do. They need to be responsible for themselves and actually follow through and do what they need. And we give them all the tools to do that. So we compiled all the different letters and different dispute methods that all of these credit repair companies were using. We put them all in the database. It's me and the majority of the videos teaching you exactly what you need to do and how to do it. I mean, we walk you through step by step. So that's all available to people, but they have to have accountability. They have to do it. You know, if they're not going to take the effort to do it themselves, nothing's going to change.
Which pretty much is relevant to every facet of life.
100%. And I think that's kind of the main thing is it was like, I don't want to work with people who aren't trying to invest in themselves and actually make a difference. And a lot of times when we would send people to credit repair companies, that's what happens. They would tell them, hey, go mail out these letters. And then the person would have the letters sit on their kitchen counter for 6 months and they never do it. And they complain. And it's like, well, look, if you don't want to take the effort to do something to help yourself, you're not a good fit for us anyways, you know?
Totally true. Totally true. How can everybody get a hold of you?
Yeah. So again, the best way is really Instagram at Bill Jennings. And then if you're interested in seeing what you qualify for funding, or if you want to, go through the credit course and kind of learn a little bit about credit, just hit the link in my bio on the link tree there, and I'll have access to both of those things there. And then if you're looking for additional like income streams, like I'm sure your audience is kind of all different facets. But if you do have a product or service that is higher ticket, something that typically people say, I'd love to work with you, but I can't because I can't afford it. We don't do any marketing. All of our marketing comes from our affiliate network, people who are in an industry like that have a need for their students or their clients to have access to capital. So we've got an affiliate relationship that we can set up with, you or any of your listeners that are interested in trying to create an additional revenue stream, plus close more deals because they actually have access to financing for their clients.
Wow, remove the objection.
Exactly.
Man, that's brilliant. I love it. Quick question.
Yeah.
How did you get started? Because it sounded like you had an upward trajectory, kind of fell off the wagon for a minute, and now, you've got 300K on your wrist. So let's talk about like what got you started.
Yeah. So, growing up lower middle class, I have one sister. She was the super smart one. I was the super outgoing one. And I kind of knew in high school that it was like, if one of us is going to be able to go to college, it's going to be her. It ain't going to be me. Just financially, it's like, so I just kind of, gracefully bowed out, said I'm not going to school. And right out of high school, I got into sales. So I ended up doing mortgages, and this was like, early to mid 2000s when the refi boom was happening.
Mhm.
And I was, 19, 20 years old, making six figures, refinancing people. Well, all of my friends were going into debt at school or working at Target or delivering pizzas. And I was making a bunch of money. So I started out doing that. I was working for the largest direct lender in the country. They eventually got shut down by the government because they were doing some shady things, apparently. So that ended. And then everybody that worked for that company was kind of like we were the hot prospect. So every other mortgage company tried recruiting us. So because they knew that we can sell. So I ended up starting my own brokerage, and which actually was Pathway Financial, which is my company now. So we did mortgages from like 2005 to 2007 or 8. All we did was subprime. So we were doing people who had poor credit. We were doing those no income verification loans, bank statement loans, all the kind of high interest, high risk stuff. And we were crushing it. And then when the market crashed in the end of 2007, beginning of 2008, there was literally a day that I went into the office and one after another, we get emails from one lender saying, hey, we're closing down. We're no longer funding loans. And by the end of the day, every single lender we worked with was out of business. So effectively, we were out of business as well. So we shut down at that point. And then that's kind of when things got pretty dark for me, because everything that I had built up at that point, cars were repossessed, lost the house, eventually got divorced. So I had a 1-year-old son when we got divorced. So everything was really, really bad. And I needed to kind of find a way out. I knew real estate was the key because there were so many foreclosures at that time. If you could get access to houses, you will for sure make money. Problem was I had no money, and I always understood OPM. Like people always talk about using other people's money, and I understood that. But the problem is at that point, the only people I knew who had any type of money were also people from the mortgage industry who were just as broke as me now. So I had no access to OPM. I had terrible credit at that point because everything just went bad. So I had to find kind of a different way. So what I did was I figured out, I understood banking, I understood underwriting. So I was like, how can I get access to money? So what I did was I reached out to a friend of mine's dad who had really good credit. And I was like, hey, would you be okay with me and you creating a business between the two of us? And you let me take out a bunch of credit cards under the business name using you as a personal guarantor. So like you signed for it because you have great credit, but it goes in the name of the business. Nothing will show up on your credit report. And he said, yeah. So we ended up getting $86,000 worth of business credit cards at 0% interest. I used those to buy a property, rehabbed the property, flipped it, made money. So I was like, wow, that was easy. So then I did it again. And then I was like, man, if I had a lot of money, then this would be great. So I put out those, the bandit signs that real estate investors put out that say like, we buy houses cash. I made a bunch of those that said, I will pay you up to $20,000 for your good credit. And I put an 800 number on there with the recording. And I put them in like, middle class neighborhoods, because I realized that at that time, everybody was losing their jobs. Wow. So people would value money in their pocket more than they would value their credit score at that time.
Yes.
So I had a ton of people sign up that wanted to basically partner with me, and we would use what we called OPC, other people's credit, instead of OPM, right? Good. So took out a bunch of credit cards, partnered with other people, used those to buy more real estate. And then eventually I realized like, man, this is there's a business in this opposed to me just doing this myself. So we kind of created a program. I had a ton of data at that point from trying with all these people of knowing what banks were looking for what parameters. And now here we are, 10 years later, and we do this nationwide, and we just help people get access to capital using the same methods I used for myself.
Crushing it. I love that story.
Yeah.
I love it. Man, I can't thank you enough. Bill Jennings, the funding boss at Bill Jennings on Instagram. Literally, if anybody is looking for access to capital, startup business, personal credit, business credit, all the above, this is the guy to reach out to. I can't thank you enough for your time, brother.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Have a great day.
You too.